Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Rockland Board of Sewer Commissioners. It's an in-person working session. It's an open public meeting. And with that, I'll take a motion to open the meeting.
Make a motion.
I have a motion by Dan. Do I have a second?
Second. Sherry
seconds. All in favor? Mr. DeRoss?
Yes.
Ms. Valley?
Yes.
Mr. Hashion's a yes. That's unanimous. We're going to continue of old business. I didn't see the minutes from the last meeting.
No, they're not.
Okay, so we're going to jump over that. We're also going to jump over the administrative assistant weekly update because Robin is ill. So we go to the open contract discussion. What I did is I wanted to bring everyone up to speed as much as possible. I asked for updates from the various vendors that we have contracts open with. I told them about this meeting. And if it's all said where it's a public meeting, if they wish to attend, they were welcome to. Two representatives have showed up, one from Weston Sampson, Frank Occhipinti, and one from Wright Pierce, Mr. Kevin Olson. What I'm gonna ask is, Frank, why don't you bring us up to speed where you are on Weston Sampson's contracts?
Sure.
If you could take them down in order where we are.
Absolutely. So I actually created a little presentation for you, so which is on the screen. So just I don't know if
Please, just go real briefly.
Yeah, we can go through it, but just a little bit about Weston Sampson. But basically, what we've identified with Rockland is some of based on the flow data that we've seen to date, there's roughly dry weather flow is typically about 1.5 MGD. During wet weather flow events, it's gone up to 3 to 4 MGD. And historically, it's been up 6+ MGD. So that tells us right there that, it suggests that there could be potentially between 1.5 to 4.5+ MGD of II in the system, just based on that particular information. When it comes to II, removing II, typically, any type of rehab work that you do, you're looking at between 50 and 90% removal rates, depending on the type of rehab work you do. And the reason why I bring this up is as we go into recommendations, this will come into play. When we talk about removing inflow, because usually you're cutting off that source, it's a much higher rate, so it's 90 to 100%. With inflow, again, rainwater getting into the system versus infiltration where you get the groundwater getting into the system. So I don't have to go over this, but this is some of the benefits, and this was actually identified in the Rockland wastewater treatment plant evaluation form, but there are benefits to reducing II in relation to your wastewater treatment plant. And these are just a couple of things. And then obviously, developing an II control plan is also going to help you lower those average daily flows that you're seeing during, again, peak groundwater conditions during the spring or during rain events.
Can I stop you here for a moment?
Yes.
Now, the I&I control plan, see, what you have to understand is we're coming in after the fact. There's a lot of contracts that were issued that we were not aware of. So I want to stop on the I&I control plan.
Yep. Now,
It's my understanding that contract has been issued to you.
correct.
Okay, so that's in process. Can you go over, again, the I&I control plan and then where you stand with it?
Yep. That's my next slide.
Sorry if I jumped in.
No worries. Understood. So again, the I control plan, these are just some of the things that you want to try to accomplish as part of that. And in order to accomplish those, to lower the average daily flows, reduce that risk of backups and source system overflows, and then ultimately help you increase system capacity so that, if you are looking if someone else is looking to tie in, there's capacity to tie in. So in order to do that, an annual program is typically what we recommend. And in Rockland's case, we're looking at developing a 15-year program. Year one would consist of the rainfall monitoring, groundwater monitoring, and analysis. Years 2 through 4 will focus on infiltration, looking at infiltration. Years 5 will focus on inflow based on those areas identified through years 2 through 4. And then year 6 would be some sort of rehab project based on what you've identified through years 2 through 5.
Can I stop you for a minute? I asked a lot of questions. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
no, absolutely. That's,
Okay, when you mentioned year 1, year 2, et cetera, now, we will still be having I&I work ongoing in these periods, correct?
so so when we met these, this is how we would set up that 15-year annual program.
Okay.
So when I talk about year 1, that would be, say for instance, this year. So this spring would start with the flow monitoring, rainfall monitoring, and the groundwater analysis.
If that's the contract that you're preparing the bid scope for?
Nope, that's the contract that we submitted to you for the year 1 work. I believe
Okay.
you have that. The contract, when we talk about the contract, that is separate from this II control plan.
Okay, what is the project that's gonna go after that you're preparing the bid specs for?
I will explain that in
Okay.
the next couple of slides.
Okay.
But those are good questions. So this is just, again, this is more on how we would identify an II program that would kind of check the boxes to meet some of the DEP requirements, and that's required under CMR 314 12.06, something like that, I believe. So this is required that every community have developed an II control plan and how they're going to tackle II. So this is what this program basically lays out over a 15-year period on how the town is going to tackle II.
So question, is year 1 through 5 strictly information gathering?
That's right. 1 through 5 would be collection of data, and then the goal would be every 5 years or so you would be doing some sort of capital improvement project.
Then we do that.
Because and the reason why, what you may see is in previous years you might see like where different programs might have infiltration and inflow being looked at in the same period. But because we're breaking it up into a 15-year program, you're not really looking at that big of an area each year. So in order to do an inflow program, it's really not cost effective because you have to do the advertising and there's a lot of like administration work done with the inflow program that's required, that it's not really cost effective to do it in small amounts. So that's why we're letting it build up between years 2 through 4 before we tackle the inflow, because we're going to be able to be much more efficient on providing a program like smoke testing and so forth, because you can tackle a lot. But the big setup again is like just the advertisement, you know, getting the word out to, coordinating with typically police and fire and DPW and so forth. So that's what you're seeing in that program.
Okay.
And then following years would repeat basically years 2 through 6. So it'd be kind of like a repeat.
The whole one.
Yep. So what would that look like? This is essentially what that would look like for the town. So I apologize, it's small, it's kind of hard to see, but it's roughly what you see. What you're seeing in the white lines is that infiltration work. The gray is the inflow work and the type of work associated with that. And then the green would be those CIP projects. Keep in mind, these numbers are very, very rough. For instance, we budgeted right here $1.5 million for rehab work every 5 years. That could be half of that number, depending on what we find. But keep in mind that as we go through this program and start TVing everything, not everything is going to be related to II. Some of it might be cost effective in order to do some improvements because it's more structural issues than where you have II. But if you don't repair those structural issues, that could cause a backup and eventually lead to an SSO, for example. So again, that's why you want to tackle those things. So this is kind of the layout of that plan.
Question, that plan, this plan would not preclude addressing those structural issues when they're found, rather than waiting for the,
This,
capital.
so this plan does include identifying and addressing those issues. And what you gotta keep in mind too is that, there's gonna be defects and defects identified. Not every defect is gonna be recommended for rehab, or improvements. Some are, all right, this is a long-term, there's a defect there, but it's a long-term recommendation where you might want to revisit it 5 years down the road or so
different approaches.
to re-inspect it, for example. But again, it all depends what we identify.
Okay, if I may now, this I&I control plan, again, we were out of the loop. To Kevin and Frank, how does this impact what you're doing with the CWMP? Are we repeating efforts here?
No, this is good, and that's partly why I wanted to be here today too, Chuck, was to be able to listen in on what Frank is doing, because we're gonna roll in, we don't wanna duplicate work.
Right.
And we wanna roll this II work into the CWMP, just like we're gonna roll the treatment plant evaluation that we did a couple of years ago into the CWMP.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
Great question, and we don't wanna go there.
Right, and when we were working with Dave Taylor at the time, he did share the scope that Kevin had set up for CWMP3, and just concurred that we weren't duplicating any efforts
Okay,
there.
that's what
So
my
we're
main
trying to
goal.
work hand in hand here.
Okay, now one other question. I can understand laying out the 5 years, you're breaking off in chunks for budgeting purposes. But our revenue is dependent on giving out capacity, getting permits. And right now, we're in a bind to get rid of that 67.5 to keep going back to. Once we get that, then we can release permits. There's nothing prohibiting us from going after additional I&I.
Right. This is just what is going to be submitted to DEP as a
Okay.
plan. But if you decide, hey, you know what, we found enough in years, 2 and 3 that you want to move forward with a CIP program, and you have funding to move forward with that, and that's going to help you with other things, whether it's
Bringing in more capacity.
bringing in more capacity, reducing some
Helping with
improvement
the
costs with the
Okay.
treatment facility, whatever it may be. I mean, that's up to you, but what we're trying to do is lay out a plan that's not too aggressive so that you're locked into.
Okay, but here's where we find ourselves, that we're still gonna experience the high water levels. Rick, help me out with this. So we're gonna be violating our flow. But I still have got to issue more permits to bring in revenues. How do I balance that?
So we'll talk about that under the proposed rehab project
Okay.
on the next couple of slides. So
Frank, can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
So regarding the II control plan, and again, I'm thinking a little bit with the CWMP hat on.
Right.
Has there been a commitment, on the town's behalf to get the II control plan to DEP by X date?
I don't believe there's been a commitment.
Okay.
But it was due back at
2017 was the original, unless you got an extension.
Right, it was due back in 2017.
Okay, what I had proposed to do was because I think you said your I&I plan would be to us by February, somewhere around there?
I think we could probably get it even earlier than that.
Okay, what I was going to do was roll it over into the CWMP. And
I'm just trying to think of timing
Yeah.
with the way.
That's what I wanted to do,
I would-
I'd rather have that
Yeah.
presented as part of
I mean,
that.
I would suggest you formally submit it in accordance with the 314 CMR requirement to DEP. You can always include it still as part of the CWMP as well, but I would suggest that you provide a formal submittal
I agree.
to meet that
Okay.
to meet that requirement, even though it's not on time, you still submit it and then let them comment.
Okay, so we'll submit that when it's ready,
That's-
as long as you're.
That's-
Does that make
that's-
sense?
Yes, totally, that's the right approach, yes.
Okay,
Right. So,
I'm sure this is off.
So, again, as part of that II control plan, we talked about year one, and year one, again, would focus on flow metering the town. It was done, I wanna say, actually, I don't, to be honest with you, I don't have the exact date, but I wanna say it was quite a bit. And we really wanna try to hone in on those areas that may have higher II. So again, we can tackle those, prioritize those areas first, as part of this annual program. So once we get that groundwater data and the flow data, we'll be able to identify which parts of the system, are more likely to have those higher flows in it. And in regards to the groundwater information, what we're looking to do is, we'll have groundwater data throughout the whole town, through a, one is through a database and the other is through some piezometers that we'll put in the manholes and develop a groundwater map that would look kind of similar to what you're seeing here. So everything in blue would be areas where there's high groundwater, more likely where basements would be subject to groundwater and would likely have a sump pump. And then that way we could compare that with the flow monitoring and really hone in on, hey, we're seeing flow during rain events really high and we're seeing this lag in that flow that would indicate that there's sump pumps in that area. And by comparing that in conjunction with this groundwater model, we're gonna be able to really hone in on where those illicit connections could possibly be, to help say, hey, and then there would be a program on how, whether it's a mailer or building inspection and so forth, we can go into that.
You're aware we tried that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, found a total of 7.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we could have better luck than 7.
Yeah.
I think we could have better luck than 7. And there's other ways of doing the building inspections. Again, we can get more in detail with that. But for example, some communities we piggyback off of like water meter replacement projects, for example, where you're already getting inside the building to do that water meter replacement. So to do that inspection is, there's a cost benefit there. So again, we can get into that. But again, regardless of the groundwater, we still want to identify that II and where it's coming from, and we want to separate the town into, we're thinking, 13 sub-areas. All right. This is just an example of a metering program set up for a community. This happens to be Fitchburg, Massachusetts, but this identifies where all of their meters are that we have through a web-based access. And we can kind of click on any one of these meters and then look at the data. And what that meter data is telling us is you can see during these rain events how much flow increases from that average daily flow during dry weather to those peak events during rain events. This particular one happens to be a CSO meter, but you are going to see in the metering data some of this information as well. But this is just giving you a sample of how we take this information and then do our analysis, and then we can put that towards a design storm based on DEP guidelines and figure out how much inflow you're actually getting into the system. And then we can also identify what you're seeing here is you can see, like, for instance, in April where that average flow is, it's right around here, and then you can see in June, July how it's lowered. So we can tell that during the high groundwater season, we get higher flow up here. That's telling us that the differential is infiltration. That's groundwater getting into the system.
Would Rockland have access to those meter files real time, or?
We'll be able to give them to you real time, yeah, 15-minute increments. Any questions at this point? No. All right. So, once we collect this information, as far as the TV inspection work, we populate a database, and it would look something like this, so that every single pipe, within that pipe, every single defect, every single service connection, the clock position, the infiltration amount, whether it's a factory tap, a capped, or what, all that information will be in there. And we'll also identify, in this case, we're identifying what the rehab work is.
Be careful, we don't accept industrials here.
What the rehab work is for this particular section. All this would be linked into your GIS database, so that we're gonna update all of that information, and then that's gonna allow us to do queries and generate reports for again, your reporting for your administrative order on which lines have been rehabbed, which lines have been updated, which lines are, you know, all that information will be updated. So that is the II control plan. Any questions?
Okay, so the I control plan, that's ongoing, so we're happy with that. Now this one we're going
This is the
SSES.
This is the sewer system rehab.
Proposal for rehab or sewer rate study? No, that's a rate study.
So this is the design for the rehab for the SSES work that was done by AECOM.
Okay. That's this one here.
No, that would be overseeing this work during construction.
This.
Yes. Okay. So.
This is ongoing, this is,
So this is, yes, so we're planning on getting you draft plans by tomorrow.
okay.
Chuck,
Actually,
which document are you looking at?
That's this,
What's it in? Got it, thank you.
which we actually have for you today. This is what these are right here. So these are draft rehab plans for you. So we said we'd get you draft plans and specifications by tomorrow. So basically, a little history about this was that, again, AECOM did the evaluation work within the system, and they identified some recommended rehab work. That's what you see up here. So they broke it out into mainline rehab, which is the $160,000. And then they had service connection rehab, which was in the estimate of about $675,000 for a total of $845,000. So we kind of looked at that, and I know the town definitely wanted to tackle the mainline work. That's the 87,000 gallons per day that you were referring to, but may hold off on the rehab of the service connection. So we re-looked at the service connection. So we watched every single video, we looked at those leaks on where they were coming from, and what we found is that a lot of those leaks were coming from the connection between the main and the service. And to line that service, which is what this recommendation was, they were gonna line it all the way back to the house, I believe it was.
yes.
So some of these defects, we could we could basically test and grout at the main up to 4 feet up into the surface.
And that's what we talked about.
That's what we talked about.
Yeah.
And you got a savings of about a 10% of that original cost. The other benefit to that is once you rehab that service, you can't line the main and then get a tight connection between that previous rehab service and the main. You won't be able to get that connection. The other thing too is some of these services are leaking so great, they're gonna have to put a pre-liner in there. And when they put the pre-liner in there, you may not get that seal as well, unless you put that top hat. But once you put that top hat on there, you won't be able to get you won't be able to get that tight connection between the main and that previously line service. Normally you do the main and then line the service. So what we came up with, our proposal, which was based on a discussion, was to do the main line, which we identified some additional defects that weren't identified in the AECOM report. And then we also, so that's why this is up a little higher. And then we knocked down, again, we did TV and grouting of the service connections, and that is much less. So the total rehab contract would be $332,000 roughly. 20% contingency, you're looking at about 40.
No, that 322, that's a design work.
This is
That's a physical work.
This is construction work, that's right.
Is this the whole town?
So they looked at the whole town, but this is the recommendations they got based on the whole town. And when I say look at the whole town, they looked at the whole town in some respect, but they didn't like TV the whole town.
Right, they focused on specific areas that were known problems. So
you're roughly looking at about $400,000 for a construction project. These plans that we have right here for draft that we're gonna have for you should be we talked about by the end of November, finalized once you do the review. These plans will be out for public bid, and we estimate that project to be roughly about $400,000. So
All right.
whoever bids on that project, we expect it to be $400,000.
So that's construction
That's
estimate.
construction.
all right, just for the record, for the open meeting portion, we had our working session last week, and after discussions with Frank and Veolia, the October 14th deadline, which was submitted by the town, wasn't realistic, so I asked the attorney to contact EPA for an extension, because they want everything to go through the town council. I have yet to hear. I sent him another email today asking if they've heard, so. But I can at least go on record, say we have the draft drawings.
Could you just go over that timeline again once more, please?
We will have drafts for both town and DEP review by tomorrow.
Okay, those drafts go to the board, to me.
Those will be submitted to you.
Okay.
And then we anticipate that the town would, turn around, review their comments in like 2 weeks or so. And then we can finalize those, and then we estimate that between mid to late November, we'd be able to put this out to bid.
Okay.
Now, this does not impact the November 30th submittal. This is totally
No, this is the different.
different.
Yep.
But I think on the November 30th submittal, you'd be able to say that
Yes.
this is advertised, this is currently advertised out to bid as part of your report.
I think that savings is phenomenal.
So,
Now, that
This-
service routing, that's been done up here in the Northeast?
for about 30 years.
Wonderful.
So, this is really into the weeds breakdown of what we looked at. So we looked at it in really big detail, but essentially the AECOM report had about 70 services. They claimed they were gonna remove about 161,000 gallons a day. Usually with lining, we're looking at 90%. Again, we never say 100%, because it's just removable IIs. It's gonna migrate potentially somewhere. So, and in the case of the services, I believe based on what we saw in the videos and doing a visual inspection, some of those leaks could be leaking toilets, it could be other things beyond a lining repair. So I think realistically, you might get, if I was being conservative, I would say 75%. Between 75 and 90%. So this is really the removable II that you'd be looking at. What we're proposing is again, we're looking at these areas. We definitely saw visible leaks within those first 4 feet in about 22 of those services. versus 48, we weren't sure whether it's beyond that or not, we weren't positive. So we said we're gonna remove with testing and sealing about 50% of that II, so that gives us this amount, and then further up might be only 25%. So trying to be realistic on what these removable II numbers are versus what was identified. So we're saying that it's about 51,000 gallons per day of II removal. Include the mainline inspection work that would include about 50% removal of this, and this is what AECOM identified was 50%. We agree with that, so we agree on the mainline work, we'll remove about 50% of that II, plus that with a total II removal of about 119,000 gallons for this project.
I had a brilliant question and I forgot it. Oh, no, I remember what it is now. When we talk about going 4 feet in with the grouting, we could do that from the town side and not have to worry about going onto private property.
That's right. That's the other benefit of doing the grouting versus the lining, because you're gonna get access to.
That's what I was alluding to last week. That eliminates the liability issue of going onto the people's property, residential property.
You don't have to dig up their lawns.
And
Yeah.
the big thing is, it's saving them a ton of money.
And once we do this, we're gonna go back a year later and verify whether we get leaks or not in these. That's gonna be part of that contract. The contractor's gonna have to go back. And if we find that there are some leaks still, which there may be, we can still identify them and do something in the future, and which may require the lining of that service. But why do that right away at a 10 times amount, go into people's properties, when you can still remove over 100,000 gallons of II without having to do that. So this project, again, will remove about 120,000 gallons, and I think those are conservative numbers, and those are typically, removable estimates that are consistent with DEP guidelines.
Okay, Rick, one thing, excuse me, I want you to feel free to jump in anytime.
I'm listening.
You've been totally out of it, and I want you to feel free to jump in.
I'm good, thank you.
Quick question, Frank, just to clarify, so estimating removing almost 120,000 gallons per day out of the 161.7 plus the 135, so about 300,000 total, so 120,000 out of 300,000?
That's right,
Okay.
that's right, yeah.
And that'll still free us up now to release some capacity
Right, that's
for revenue.
Yep. So this just identifies some of the areas. So it's hard to see this map, but these are some of the areas that were looked at from AECOM. You can see it, and basically they focused on, again, based on the flow isolation. They looked at that 3,000 GPDIM or greater lines. So that's what the TV. And then you can see they got some structural defects here that have been identified, and then you can see that some of the II in the lines. But here's an example, for instance, on a service connection. You can see that most of that infiltration is coming in right near the connection, near that first 1 or 2 joints. And we've seen that in some cases where there was absolutely no flow above that when we started looking at the TV. So it was very clear water. It was down right at the joint. So we feel pretty confident that that's going to seal it. Again, we only estimate 50% removal because that groundwater may rise a little and get to the next joint or migrate somewhere else. So that's why we were pretty conservative on removal. But essentially, we're going to be removing 100% of that infiltration coming in at that point. It's just we don't know what will happen after that.
It's gotta go somewhere.
Yeah,
As engineers, we're conservative.
Water has to find a way to.
It always does.
Yeah, we're trying to be conservative as engineers and be more realistic with numbers instead of saying, hey, we're gonna remove 100% of this stuff. We're not
You know, what's the lifetime of these pipes anyways? You're gonna line.
On the
It has-
liners,
I mean, liners or what, rubber or something, plastic?
so liners, they're basically, they're cured in place pipe. It's basically almost like a felt resin. It's a felt pipe with some impregnated resin. They introduce heat to that, whether it's steam or water, typically steam nowadays, and it becomes a pretty solid pipe. I would compare it probably closer to fiberglass. I don't know, Kevin, if you get a better description
No,
of it, but
that's-
it's almost like
that's good.
it's almost like a thick fiberglass when it's all said and done. But
These
it's
are
basically-
clay pipes, right?
These are clay pipes, that's right.
That's what we currently have.
Yeah.
What?
Sorry?
Yes, the vitrified clay pipes. So that's what you're seeing here. And they're great for, hydrogen sulfide resistance, but they, when they become brittle and they break, and it just wreaks havoc. And it just gets worse every time, if you have poor soil conditions and so forth. So that is everything regarding to the rehab project.
Okay, Kevin, you have any?
Real quick question. Frank, have you guys thought about, so after, the town goes ahead and does the rehab project, what about any post-construction flow monitoring to kind of figure out how successful? We're making
Right.
estimates now
Yeah.
on percent removal.
That's right, yep.
What are you thinking there?
So normally we go back and do flow isolation on that. We do plan on going back there a year later and TVing all these areas, but again, that would be part of the contractor's responsibility. We withhold 10% of the contract in order for them to come back and do that. But yeah, flow isolation would be the way to identify that. The only issue you run into is
Things
you know what Kevin knows where I'm going with this. You look at these pipes at a snapshot,
Yeah.
right? A certain year, certain groundwater. The next year we might have a drought, and we might not have that same groundwater.
I've been trying to
it
drill
might
that
not-
through to everybody.
It may not be apples to apples.
Try to mimic it as best you can.
Right.
but There's no
It
guarantee.
there's no way you can predict what that groundwater would be. So what we go in there, again, at least as warranty work, we would go back in there to verify that, have a visual inspection, is it leaking, is it not? And then we'll be able to say, we've done our due diligence on identifying that this repair was successful.
Okay, now, with the bid package you're preparing, we issue that, it goes out to bid, we select the vendor. Your package includes vendor oversight, the selected party oversight during actual work?
That's what you have in front of you.
Okay.
There.
Okay.
That would include that. And what we would do is we would include providing the record drawings and again, updating the GIS. That would be all be included.
I know you can't see. Let's paint the scenario, if you will. It goes out to bid December 1. December 1 to January 1, people look at, how much time do you think vendors would need to look at it?
So-
6 weeks?
Yeah, so let's start off with the schedule.
I'm just trying to get a.
So if we're talking about the end of November, where we're gonna kind of have finalized plans.
Yeah,
Let's say we put it out for, we could definitely get it into the we can get it out to bid by the end, say sometime in the end of November.
Okay.
Typically, you want it out for about 3 to 4 weeks at a minimum. So let's say 4 weeks.
let's say 6 weeks.
Let's say 6 weeks, so that will bring us into like mid-January.
That's the bids in.
Yeah, and then, those bids would be open. Usually it takes like a month or so to execute the contracts. We would start going through, reviewing shop drawing reviews, but we would be on schedule as soon as that spring thaw happens. We'll be ready to go come March.
March 1st?
March, April, depending on.
Snow.
Okay, the way I'm looking at these bids, that come in sealed bids, we'll open them in a public meeting, keep everything above board. March 1st.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I would say March, I would suggest
April.
providing a range, some
March,
range,
April.
based on weather permitting, based somewhere between mid-March and say
And
mid-April.
that's actual work happening in the sewer.
Starting, and then I believe we're providing like a 90-day construction period for this project. So 60 or 90, I can't recall exactly.
and I'm gonna really put you on the spot. We start the work April. Best case scenario that we see results, how long do you think it would be before I can capture that 70,000 gallons that I need to start taking in revenue? July, August?
Okay, I mean, once the work is complete, I think you could.
Ongoing, we don't have to, like, the second we hit, say, okay, we've done this, and we think it'll be the 70,000 gallons, I'd feel comfortable releasing
Yeah,
permits.
yeah, I mean, we could track that based on the rehab work that's going on. I mean, we don't typically
I know that.
identify like to the contract.
And I'm really putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, we could try to track which lines they're doing and,
All you're gonna have to do is put me in a ballpark. Not now,
yeah,
when the work is ongoing,
yeah,
just get me into a ballpark.
yeah.
Yeah, so as the
That-
work is progressing.
We can tell you exactly, based on the lines that have been completed, what we estimate for that removal, yeah, and we can keep running tabs of that. So-
Right,
So
right.
if that's something you're looking at as part of like,
So as the work progresses, we can say, well, we believe we've removed X
so if
number.
you want a weekly update on that or a monthly update on that, we can do that.
I wouldn't do try you down weekly, that'd be absurd.
Okay,
I'll
so
check-
we can do,
Just so the commission knows too, it kind of ties back to the question I asked a few minutes ago, how do you prove how successful the estimates were, which is sometime thereafter, right? We talked about maybe up to a year after, right?
a
Well, I
year,
understand
So but you-
a
it sounds like
year
what you can
in
do
order
is you can move forward with, on
I can,
estimates.
I understand that, but I just wanna be able to be comfortable enough saying, you know what, I feel we're at a point where we can release 5,000 gallons
I
of
hear you,
capacity.
I hear you.
Right, if you think
Based
you
on
remove
estimates.
30 and you're saying
If
you're
we're-
adding 5, you're gonna be contributing 5, I mean,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
If we're confident in the estimate that we're looking to
Yeah,
remove.
that's all I'm looking at.
It should
Okay.
have that.
Just as long as people understood the
Yeah.
basis of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Rate study.
great stuff.
Rate study, the contract has been issued, so that's ongoing.
Yep. So we've gotten most of the information that we need for the rate study. This has been, but we still need some information, which I think I've provided to you. But initially, that rate study, the contract, we were gonna assess fiscal years 23 through 27. Since you're already in fiscal year 23, it makes sense, we're gonna be looking at 24 to 28. So we're just gonna slide that, it's not a big deal.
And that's something that you need as well for the CWMP, or you have?
We have been talking a little bit, which is good. So yeah, we'll coordinate, as
Okay.
appropriate.
We might, yeah, so the big thing is part of this rate study is trying to identify future CIP projects, capital improvement projects. And that will basically, typically it would be broken down into the treatment plant, pump stations, and the collection system.
Okay,
So-
Rick, that's where I wanted to bring you in, you and I will hammer that out.
The collection system, I've already given you some, again, very conservative, high-level numbers that I feel like if you budget for that much, you should be within that or less. So if we're looking at trying to, again, budget and predict, I think we'll be in good shape. So collection system, I think we'll be in pretty good shape with what we have for numbers right now. Pump stations, we know that you've got a couple and you've done a couple, so we can basically, based on the size of those pump stations, kind of come up with some ballparks for the short term. I know Kevin is gonna be going through a more deep analysis on that, but for the short term, to try to get this rate study done by hopefully the end of this year, we can come up with some ballpark numbers. So that's what we're hoping to do, and then obviously the treatment plant, we're relying on Kevin to provide some numbers.
What date do you wanna give me to get you information?
If I could still get it in the next couple weeks, we should be able to still meet that end of the year deadline. And that rate study will give you a couple of rate alternatives on some options on what that would look like. And again, when I say by the end of, late November, early December, we'd get a draft. We'd be able to get a draft to you. We'd probably meet with you, go over that. You may want to tweak some things, finalize it, and then we'd get it finalized. But to turn around to finalize it shouldn't be that much.
No, what thing I want for Sherry and Dan, the rate study is for residential and user rates.
That's right.
It's not talking development fees.
Right.
So this is just an example of the looking at the rate study and projections. So again, if you are trying to maintain, let's say for example, this is just an example here, but if you're trying to retain earnings of approximately 15%, and let's say you start off and again, this is just an example, you could be starting off way up here, you could be starting off way down here, but you're starting off somewhere. But if, let's say you have plenty of revenue right now, you got plenty of retained earnings right now, you haven't done much spending, you're holding off on some future projects. If you do nothing with your rates, you're gonna eventually spend that down, and you're kind of gonna be in the hole. Essentially, is what this graph shows. What we want to do as part of this rate study is kind of see all those capital improvement projects in the future, see all those other things that you're going to be required to do and have to do, and instead of being in a hole down the road, we're going to be able to somehow adjust those rates, provide you with a rate, and we're going to try to spread it out evenly over that 5-year period so that your revenue will maintain somewhere, again, in that your retained earnings would remain somewhere in that 15%, and it would hold right there. And then typically, after 5 years, you do another rate study in another 5 years to kind of reassess what's going to be happening again. But that's essentially what this rate study is going to be able to provide you. How is the town doing with retained earnings and their current rate compared to future spending? It's kind of like maintaining a checkbook. Are you going to be able to have enough money to pay bills and keep where you have to be in the future? So that's what we're looking to do, provide you with that information.
We can get a copy of your presentations, overheads, couldn't we?
Of course.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Okay. Okay, that's where we are now.
So that's where we are.
What I would like to discuss is okay. The construction services. For 49.
Yes.
That ongoing, or is that?
That is not, that's, you asked me to provide
Okay, okay. This was the monitoring.
This would be full construction oversight. Would be full-time oversight for that project, for this project proposed to go out on the street. And then again, it would be the record drawings and updating the GIS.
And that's after the bid is awarded.
Yes.
Okay. And what was the other one that we discussed for?
The year one for the inflow groundwater, the year one work.
And could you go over that for Dan and them as well?
Yep. So again, that would be, sorry, I gave that to you, just, So that would be, we're actually looking at 15 ground, flow monitoring meters spread out over 15 subcatchment areas. So we would break the system up into 15 areas and then put a meter downstream of each of those 15 locations.